Ocean Day, June 8th, 2030. And the headline reads, Victory at The Hague. The International Court of Justice rules in favor of ocean rights. Seabed mining giant ordered to pay 20% of profits annually to the Sustainable Oceans Trust Fund or cease operations globally. This landmark ruling came after 5 years of relentless advocacy by the Sustainable Oceans Squad, a global collective that transformed from scattered voices into a unified wave force for marine protection. The court has recognized, finally, the ocean's inherent rights to life, regeneration, and ecosystem integrity, a legal precedent that will reshape maritime law forever. Now, you've heard the headline, but how did it come to be? Imagine, if you will, that in the summer of 2025, the world's relationship with the ocean stood at a crossroads. And yes, we were about to have the Global Ocean Summit in Nice. At this summit, the SIDS Futures Lab, Small Island Developing States Futures Lab, led the charge to establish a conversation on the blue lifesaver economy. What is that? Just a way of looking at the blue economy, but using the framework of the donut economics to say we do indeed have a planetary boundary of how we use the sea, as well as a social and environmental boundary as to how we want to ensure the people who benefit from the sea live their lives. We worked with the Inter-Parliamentary Union SIDS members and unveiled our groundbreaking approach on the sidelines of the Ocean Summit in Nice. You see, we could not afford to make it to Nice, but thanks to the advent of the internet, the Zoom, we were able to be present virtually. And in that, we gathered many of the organizations from around the small island developing states to launch an initiative called the Yemanja Initiative, named after the Yoruba goddess of the sea. This initiative introduced the blue lifesaver economy as the framework and was a radical departure from a traditional blue economy models that prioritize extraction over regeneration. Yes, we did. Led by Dr. Zadie Oceans, a diver from Fiji, and a founding member of the SIDS Futures Lab, which had been formed back in 2024 on the margins of the UN Small Island Developing States Conference and on the margin of the UN Pact for the Future. She said in our conversations, for too long we have treated the ocean as a commodity. Yemanja, the goddess, teaches us to see the sea as an ancestor, deserving of rights, protection, and indeed reverence. And so it was. We began the journey, the first row, if you will, across the ocean of change in 2025 to begin to build a network. By 2026, we had gotten support to establish the first Ocean Futures Lab in Barbados with the global network of marine observatories planned. We've done this in partnership with the International University of the Sea coming out of France, and by catalyzing fisherfolk from Samoa, MPA managers from the Caribbean and the Philippines, traditional divers from the Pacific and Japan and other parts of Asia, and marine scientists from every continent who believed in the vision and the promise of the Yemanja Initiative. Sustainable Ocean Squad was beginning to take shape. The first Ocean Futures Lab featured cutting-edge research facilities along with traditional knowledge centers around the world where we're able to benefit from the elders who knew and could share centuries-old marine wisdom. Parliamentary environmentalists from Antigua to Seychelles began to champion legislation that granted legal standing to coral reefs, whale migration routes, and critical marine habitats in their respective nations. Oh, this was not easy. Of course it would be. Change like this is never is. But by 2027, the meshwork had begun to emerge, and by then, we had over 17 Ocean Futures Lab operational across the 6 continents and indigenous knowledge integration began to show promising results. You see, we formed a meshwork of interconnected labs working with fisher folk, yes, fisher folk who, after all, were on the seas every day, working with NGOs, those small coral reef organizations, those small marine protected area organizations, and we began to link ourselves, much like a sea fan, if you will, and create this meshwork of knowledge and of activists and advocates and actionists committing to ensuring that we could create a lab with ecological knowledge as well as innovative solution. From floating labs in the Arctic with the Eskimo and Inuit people to underwater observation stations, we began to partner with the universities and academic institutions and research labs of like mind to create something new, something different, something that could shift the paradigm. We had a deep sea mining engineer who had turned religious and turned right to establish the first regenerative seabed initiative in Portugal, demonstrating how former extraction sites could be restored to thriving ecosystems. Yes, our little band of, and some people called us bandits, but our little squad was beginning to take shape and to move globally. We had our first legal breakthrough in 2028 when Ecuador granted constitutional rights to the Galapagos Marine Reserve and mounted an international legal challenge to seabed mining in the Ecuador Sea. Oh my, wasn't it wonderful? We were able to benefit from what Ecuador and Bolivia and the Maori people of New Zealand had done to bring new cases, and supported by the Futures Declarations movement and community, we filed our first groundbreaking case at the International Court of Justice. We argued that industrial seabed mining violated the ocean's fundamental rights to ecological integrity and species preservation. We got support from an unprecedented coalition. Yes, from traditional Pacific seagoers, navigators, to Inuit seal hunters, to Caribbean fishers, Mediterranean sponge divers, and marine biologists from around the world. The meshwork, the hub, the squad was building more and more legs. By 2029, the momentum was in full force. It was like, and I hate to use the word hurricane, but yes, it was like a hurricane wind force was blowing and people were just gathering up steam. Maybe it was helped by the fact that more and more beach whales were being sighted, but this certainly helped to create a passion and a purity of purpose for people who did not consider themselves environmentalists or seafarers, but began to believe that the ocean was indeed necessary for human life to continue. The Blue Lifesaver Economy Framework, refined through years of community input and scientific validation, was officially endorsed by the UN Environmental Programme as a model for sustainable ocean governance. One of the indigenous leaders representing the Indigenous Navigators Alliance said, "Our ancestors taught us that the ocean is not ours to own. We belong to the ocean. And our proposal is that we simply recognize globally what us indigenous peoples have always known." And so, yes, here we are, World Ocean Day 2030, 5 years after the Global Ocean Summit in Nice, having a landmark case where the International Court of Justice, The Hague, rules in favor of ocean rights. The ruling was unanimous and sweeping. The court has declared that the ocean possesses inherent rights that supersede commercial interests and has established a legal precedent for ecosystem-centered jurisprudence and ocean governance worldwide. Thank you to the SIDS International Parliamentary Union members who led our charge. The Sustainable Ocean Squad 5-year campaign has fundamentally altered humanity's relationship with the sea, but we're just beginning. The Yamanja framework is taking wings and setting sail. to the future we want. I know that some of you must be saying, aha, this is pure fiction, but it is not. This scenario, this story could actually really happen if the dots lined up. And let me assure you, there are many dots that are factual in this story. For one, we do have a SIDS Futures Lab, founded last year on the margins of the UN Conference on Small Island Developing States. We do also have a plethora of world fisherfolk organizations, world coral reef organizations could form the basis of the grassroots activists that will become part of the Sustainable Ocean Squad. We also have a group out of Paris that are interested in setting up an international university of the sea and have a proposal to establish a global network of Ocean Futures Lab. All we need is a catalyst. And I believe that by sharing this story, we will find a catalyst among the parliamentarians that are part of ParleAmericans. After all, if an environmentalist parliamentarian from Colombia or Mexico or Costa Rica or any of the islands that lap the Caribbean Sea were to pick up this story, we would have a place to start if we decided to start. So with that, let us connect the dots. Let's get going. The ball is in your court, ParleAmericas. Let's do it.